Roy Benavidez did not need a gun to win the Medal of Honor, and how he got there makes him even more of a legend. Roy was born in 1935 to his Mexican farmer father and his Native American mother. Unfortunately, they both passed away by the time he was 7 due to tuberculosis. He ended up going and living with his grandparents, dropping out of school in the 8th grade so that he could work full-time to help support the family. Roy ended up enlisting in the Texas Army National Guard in 1952 during the Korean War, and then was put on Army active duty in 1955. But during that time, the U.S. wasn't fighting a war, so he ended up just honing his skills and joining the elite special forces, the Studies and Observation Group, also known as SOG. In 1965, Roy was sent to Vietnam as a Special Forces Advisor, which was a really nice way of the U.S. saying, we're sending troops, but we're not sending troops, that kind of thing. And while he was there on patrol, he stepped on a landmine, which would have killed any normal person that wasn't made of pure Roy Benavidez. So after being blown up, he was evacuated back to Texas, where the doctors told him in no uncertain terms, you will never walk again. But according to Roy, that just simply wouldn't fly. So during the nights, against doctors' orders, he would crawl on his chin and his elbows to the wall to put pressure on his legs. It was such an excruciating activity, it would bring him to tears. But the other paralyzed and amputee soldiers in the ward with him would cheer him on. And a year later, Roy Benavidez walks out arm in arm with his wife. Now, just walking again makes this story miraculous. However, Roy decided walking wasn't good enough. He needed to be able to rejoin the Special Forces and return to Vietnam, which of course he did in 1968. It was 1968. Roy's on base in Vietnam when he hears a call over the radio that a 12-man Special Forces group, many of them his friends, and their 9 South Vietnamese allies are under fire by 1,000 North Vietnamese. And they have sent in 3 helicopters to try to rescue them, but they've all been peppered with bullets. One of the helicopters is coming back and asks if anybody wants to volunteer to go rescue these men. Roy Benavidez does not waste time. He grabs a medical bag and his knife, forgetting his rifle, and goes back into the fray for his 6 hours in hell. So when Roy gets there, everyone is injured. He starts running across enemy fire to save his comrades, dragging them into defensive positions, bandaging them up, and giving them morphine. While he's doing this, he is shot in both legs, but it doesn't bother him because he's got that much adrenaline going on. Once he set up a defensive perimeter, he realized his friend Sergeant Wright wasn't there, and so he goes charging towards the enemy to find Sergeant Wright. That's when a North Vietnamese soldier jumps up and bayonets him in the stomach. That's when Benavidez drew his knife and revenge stabbed this soldier, killing him. He then picked up the AK-47, killing 2 of that guy's comrades. He eventually did find Sergeant Wright's body and began to drag him back towards the helicopter, where Benavidez was shot again in the side and then knocked unconscious by a grenade exploding. He eventually regains consciousness, runs back to where the evac helicopter was supposed to be, but it had been shot down, so he then re-saves those 5 guys that had been on that helicopter and then calls for another one, which he then loads them all into and eventually evacs with him. Roy had 37 wounds, including gunshot wounds and shrapnel that the doctors thought he was dead, so they were zipping him up in a body bag when he spat in their face to let him know he was still alive, because nothing could kill Roy.